When Isabella Rodriguez collapsed in her luxury penthouse at 35 weeks pregnant, her billionaire husband James Park had one priority: get her to the nearest hospital. But fate had other plans. The closest medical facility was St. Catherine's Memorial, where Dr. Michael Torres, Isabella's ex-fiancé from medical school, was now the head of obstetrics. What happened in those critical 48 hours would test the bonds of marriage, forgiveness, and the true meaning of love. This isn't a story about betrayal or jealousy. It's about three people who discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love is putting someone else's happiness above your own. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Isabella Rodriguez Park, 32 years old. A former pediatric nurse who had transformed her life into one of philanthropy and service. 8 months pregnant with her first child, she carried herself with the grace of someone who had overcome tremendous obstacles. Her journey from the streets of East Los Angeles to Manhattan's elite social circles was nothing short of remarkable. James Park, 36 years old. A tech mogul whose renewable energy empire had made him worth $2.3 billion. But behind the fortune lay a man who understood struggle. He had grown up in the foster care system, bouncing from home to home until he aged out at 18. His wealth never made him forget where he came from. Dr. Michael Torres, 34 years old. Head of obstetrics at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital. Brilliant, dedicated, and carrying the weight of a decision he made 8 years ago, a decision that cost him the woman he thought he'd marry. Their love story, Isabella and James, began in the most unlikely place. A hospital charity gala where James was writing checks and Isabella was volunteering her time. She saw past his wealth to the man who'd grown up in foster care, while he admired her dedication to helping others despite her own humble beginnings. What started as a conversation about the hospital's pediatric wing became late-night talks about dreams, losses, and the families they'd never had. Tuesday, March 15, 2:47 p.m. James was in the middle of the most important board meeting of his career. His company was about to announce a breakthrough in solar energy storage that would revolutionize the industry. Stock prices would soar. Investors would make millions. But none of that mattered when his phone buzzed with Isabella's number. James. Her voice was strained, barely above a whisper. Something's wrong. There's blood, and the pain. He was out of that boardroom before she finished the sentence. His assistant tried to follow, reminding him about the presentation, the investors waiting. James didn't look back. He had learned long ago that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. Racing through Manhattan traffic in his black Tesla, James faced a decision that would change everything. Their private hospital, the one with the private suite, the concierge service, the doctors who knew Isabella's entire medical history, was 25 minutes away through crosstown traffic. But St. Catherine's Memorial was 8 minutes. 8 minutes that could mean the difference between life and death for his wife and unborn daughter. He knew Isabella's history with Michael. She had told him everything during one of their late-night conversations in the early days of their relationship. How they'd met in medical school, how they'd planned their future together, how Michael had chosen a prestigious residency in Boston over their engagement. How she'd waited for him to come back, but he never did. James gripped the steering wheel tighter. His wife and daughter's lives hung in the balance. The past would have to wait. Dr. Michael Torres was reviewing patient charts when his pager buzzed with an emergency code. Emergency admission, high-risk pregnancy, placental abruption suspected. He grabbed his coat and headed for the ER, his mind already running through protocols and procedures. Then he saw the name on the chart, Isabella Rodriguez Park. For a moment, the world stopped. 8 years dissolved in an instant. He could see her face from their graduation day, could hear her laugh from their study sessions, could feel the weight of the engagement ring he'd bought but never had the chance to give her. Professional composure took over. Whatever their history, she was a patient now. She was in danger, and he was the only one who could help her. When James burst through the hospital doors, carrying Isabella in his arms, Michael was waiting. The two men locked eyes for the first time in 8 years. No words were exchanged. There was no time for the past when the present demanded everything they had. Isabella drifted in and out of consciousness as they rushed her to the examination room. In her brief moments of clarity, she saw Michael's face above her, saw James holding her hand, saw the terror in both their eyes. "The baby," she whispered. "Please save my baby." Michael's examination confirmed his worst fears. Placental abruption. The placenta had separated from the uterine wall. Both mother and baby were in immediate danger. They had minutes, not hours, to act. "We need to get her to surgery now," Michael told James, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The placenta has separated from the uterine wall. If we don't deliver the baby immediately, we could lose them both." James felt the floor shift beneath his feet. All his money, all his connections, all his power, none of it mattered now. His wife and daughter's lives were in the hands of the man Isabella had once loved. But as they prepped Isabella for surgery, Michael discovered something that complicated everything. Her medical records showed a rare blood type, AB negative, with additional complications from antibodies she developed during previous pregnancies. Pregnancies James knew nothing about. "I need to know about her obstetric history," Michael said quietly, pulling James aside. "The records show she's had complications before. Miscarriages. This information could be critical for her care." James stared at him, the revelation hitting like a physical blow. Isabella had never told him about losing other babies. She'd carried that pain alone, even after they'd married. I didn't know," James whispered. "She never said anything." Michael saw the pain in the other man's eyes, the same pain he'd carried for years, wondering what might have been different if he'd stayed, if he'd chosen love over ambition. The operating room became a battlefield against time. Isabella's blood pressure was dropping rapidly. The baby's heart rate was becoming erratic. Michael worked with focused intensity, his hands steady despite the emotional storm raging inside him. Outside the OR, James paced the waiting room like a caged animal. Every minute felt like an hour. He made desperate phone calls, trying to locate donors with Isabella's rare blood type. His business partner in Tokyo had it. Could they get emergency transport? His assistant was already arranging a private jet. But it might not be fast enough. Inside the operating room, Michael made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. He invited James to the observation deck, something typically reserved for medical students and family members of hospital staff. But this wasn't a typical situation. "She'd want you here," Michael said simply. "And I want you to see that I'll do everything in my power to save them." James watched through the glass as Michael worked to save his family. He saw the concentration on the surgeon's face, the gentle way he spoke to Isabella, even though she was unconscious, the reverence with which he handled their unborn daughter. In that moment, James understood something profound. This wasn't about competition or jealousy. This was about love in its purest form, the kind of love that puts another person's well-being above everything else. At 4:23 a.m., baby Sophia entered the world. Her first cry echoed through the operating room like a song of hope. Michael held her up for James to see through the observation window, tears streaming down both men's faces. But the celebration was short-lived. Isabella began hemorrhaging. Her blood pressure plummeted. The monitors screamed warnings as her body went into shock. "We're losing her," one of the nurses said. Michael's hands moved with practiced precision, but James could see the fear in the surgeon's eyes. This was the moment that would define everything, not just for Isabella and James, but for Michael as well. The woman they both loved was slipping away, and all the medical training in the world might not be enough to save her. The next 14 hours would test the limits of medicine, love, and human endurance. Michael worked without stopping, his colleagues rotating in and out as he refused to leave Isabella's side. James sat in the waiting room, holding his newborn daughter, whispering prayers to any god who might be listening. The blood arrived from Tokyo at 6:47 a.m. The transfusion began immediately. Isabella's vitals stabilized momentarily, then dropped again. She was fighting a battle that none of them could fight for her. Hour 12 of Isabella's Crisis. The hospital hallway had become James's world, a sterile purgatory where he walked endless laps, his daughter sleeping in his arms, while his wife fought for her life behind closed doors. Michael emerged from the OR for the first time in hours, his surgical scrubs stained with blood, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. James stood up immediately, searching the surgeon's eyes for any sign of hope. "She's stable for now," Michael said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "But the next few hours are critical. Her body has been through tremendous trauma. We've stopped the bleeding, but there could be complications we haven't seen yet." James nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Michael looked down at baby Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. "She's beautiful," Michael said softly. "She has Isabella's nose. Would you like to hold her?" James asked, surprising himself with the offer. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he took the baby. For a moment, he imagined what it would have been like if things had been different, if he'd made different choices 8 years ago. But looking at James, seeing the love and terror in the other man's eyes, he knew Isabella had found exactly what she deserved. They sat in silence in the family waiting room, taking turns holding Sophia while nurses came and went with updates on Isabella's condition. It was James who finally broke the silence. "Why did you leave her?" Michael had been expecting this question for hours. He'd rehearsed answers in his head, but now, faced with the raw pain in James's voice, all his prepared responses seemed inadequate. "I was 26 years old and I thought I knew everything," Michael said quietly. "Harvard offered me a residency in their cardiac surgery program. It was the opportunity of a lifetime," they said. "The kind of opportunity that only comes once." "But Isabella was here." "Isabella was here," Michael confirmed. "And I thought if it was real love, it would wait. I thought I could have both, the career and the girl. I was wrong." James studied the other man's face. "Do you regret it?" Michael was quiet for a long time, watching Sophia sleep. "I regret hurting her. I regret being too proud to admit I'd made a mistake and come back sooner. But watching you with her today, seeing how you dropped everything when she needed you, I think maybe everything happened the way it was supposed to." "She never told me about the miscarriages," James said suddenly. "Were they?" "No," Michael said immediately. "Those happened after I left. She went through that alone. I didn't find out until today when I saw her medical records." The weight of Isabella's private pain settled between them. Both men had loved her, but only one had been there when she needed someone most. At 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday morning, 36 hours after Isabella's collapse, the monitors in her room began to show improvement. Her blood pressure stabilized. Her breathing became stronger. The crisis wasn't over, but for the first time since this nightmare began, there was genuine hope. Michael allowed himself to sleep for 2 hours while James maintained his vigil. When the surgeon returned, he found James reading to their daughter from a medical journal, the only reading material available in the ICU waiting room. "The average human heart beats approximately 100,000 times per day," James read aloud to Sophia. "In a lifetime, that's about 2.5 billion heartbeats." Michael smiled despite his exhaustion. "That's quite a bedtime story." "It's all they had," James said with a weak smile. "But I figure she should get used to medical terminology, considering where she was born." "Actually," Michael said, settling into the chair beside James, "there's something poetic about that fact. 2.5 billion chances to love someone. Isabella's heart has been beating for 32 years. That's about 1.1 billion heartbeats so far. And somehow, in all those beats, she found you." James looked at Michael with new respect. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone I could hate," James admitted. "Someone who would make this easier." Michael laughed softly. "I'm sorry to disappoint you." Wednesday, 3:47 p.m. Isabella's eyes fluttered open for the first time in over 48 hours. The first thing she saw was James's face, unshaven and exhausted but radiant with relief. The second thing she saw was Michael, standing at the foot of her bed with a medical chart in his hands and tears in his eyes. "Hey there, beautiful," James whispered, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. "The baby. She's perfect," James said, his voice breaking. "She's absolutely perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and she's got your stubborn streak already." Isabella turned her head slightly and saw Michael. For a moment, time folded in on itself. She was 24 again, studying for finals in the medical school library, making plans for a future that never came to pass. "Michael," she said softly, "you saved us." "We saved you," Michael corrected, glancing at James. "All of us together." Over the next few hours, as Isabella grew stronger, the three of them had the conversation they'd all been avoiding. Isabella learned about the blood transfusion from Tokyo, about James and Michael working together through the crisis, about the hours of surgery that had saved her life. "I need to tell you both something," Isabella said, her voice growing stronger. "About the pregnancies I lost before James and I met." James squeezed her hand. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Isabella insisted. "I should have told you, James. I lost 3 babies in my 20s. Each one broke my heart a little more. When I met you, I was afraid to hope for a family again. I didn't tell you because I was terrified it would happen again." Michael stepped forward. "Isabella, I need you to know, I didn't know. If I had known what you were going through, you would have come back out of pity?" Isabella asked gently. "Michael, you made the right choice. You became an incredible doctor. Look at what you've accomplished here. And James," she turned to her husband, "you gave me the courage to try again, to believe in love again." "But I should have been there," Michael said, his voice filled with regret. "You're here now," Isabella replied. "When it mattered most, you were here." 3 days later, as Isabella prepared to leave the hospital with Sophia, James made an announcement that surprised everyone. "I want to fund a free clinic," he said, addressing Michael. "A maternal health clinic for women who can't afford private care. Women like Isabella was, when she was alone and afraid." Michael stared at him. "James, that's incredibly generous, but why?" "Because I've learned something these past few days," James said. "Love isn't about possession. It's about making sure the people you care about are safe and happy, even when you're not the one providing that safety and happiness." Isabella looked between the two men who had shaped her life in such different ways. "There's something else," she said quietly. "I want to go back to nursing. I want to work at this clinic." "Isabella, you don't have to work," James said. "You can focus on Sophia, on your charitable work." "I need to work," Isabella said firmly. "I need to help other women who are facing what I faced. Women who think they're alone." Michael felt something shift in his chest, not the old longing for what might have been, but something new. Purpose. Hope. The feeling that maybe all the pain of the past had led to this moment, this chance to do something meaningful. "There's one condition," Michael said, looking at both of them. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. State-of-the-art equipment, the best staff, everything these women deserve." James smiled. "Money is no object. And I want to be Sophia's godfather," Michael added, surprising himself with the request. Isabella and James exchanged a look. "We'd be honored," Isabella said. The unthinkable thing that happened at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital wasn't betrayal or heartbreak or the destruction of a marriage. It was something far more rare and beautiful. 3 people who could have been enemies chose to become family instead. In the weeks that followed, as Isabella recovered and Sophia grew stronger, an unusual friendship bloomed. Michael became a regular visitor to the park penthouse, not as a threat to their marriage, but as an honorary uncle to Sophia and a trusted friend to them both. The clinic became their shared mission. James provided the funding, Isabella brought her nursing expertise and her heart for helping others, and Michael offered his medical knowledge and his connections in the healthcare community. "The Rivera Park Maternal Health Center," Michael said, reading the proposed sign during one of their planning meetings. "I like the sound of that." "Actually," Isabella said, "I was thinking of something else. The Second Chances Clinic. Because that's what this is really about, giving women a second chance at motherhood, at hope, at believing in happy endings." 6 months later, the Second Chances Clinic opened its doors on a crisp October morning. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small but meaningful, just the three of them, Sophia in her stroller, and the first group of expectant mothers who would receive care at the facility. Isabella, now fully recovered and back to her work as a nurse practitioner, felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. She was helping women who reminded her of herself, scared, alone, unsure if they deserved the care they needed. James watched his wife work with patience and felt his heart swell with pride. She'd found her calling, and he'd found his purpose in supporting her dreams. The business world still demanded his attention, but he'd learned to set boundaries, to prioritize what truly mattered. Michael looked around the clinic, at the state-of-the-art equipment, at the comfortable waiting room, at the photos on the wall of healthy babies born to mothers who'd received care here, and felt something he'd never experienced in his years of private practice. Complete satisfaction. That evening, they celebrated at the park penthouse. Sophia, now 6 months old, gurgled happily in her bouncy seat while the adults shared dinner and stories from the clinic's first day. "To second chances," James said, raising his glass. "To choosing love over fear," Isabella added. "To family," Michael concluded, "in all its unexpected forms." As the months passed, people often asked them how they made it work, how a husband could be friends with his wife's ex-fiancé, how a woman could maintain relationships with two men who'd both loved her, how a man could let go of his regrets and embrace a new kind of happiness. The answer was simpler than anyone expected. They chose to see love as infinite rather than finite. They chose to believe that caring for someone meant wanting their happiness above all else, even if that happiness didn't include you in the way you'd originally hoped. Michael never married. He dated occasionally, but he'd found his purpose in his work and his extended family with the Parks. He was Sophia's favorite uncle, the one who brought her medical textbooks to play with and taught her to count in Spanish. Isabella and James's marriage grew stronger with each passing year. They had 2 more children, a son named Daniel and another daughter named Carmen. Michael delivered both babies, and each birth was a celebration of the unusual family they'd created. The Second Chances Clinic expanded to 3 locations across the city. Isabella became the director of nursing, Michael remained the chief of obstetrics, and James's foundation funded similar clinics in 12 other cities. But the real measure of their success wasn't in the numbers or the accolades. It was in the quiet moments, Sophia's first word being, "Uncle Mike," Isabella's laugh as she watched James try to change a diaper, Michael's tears of joy at each baby's first cry in the delivery room. 5 years after that terrifying night at St. Catherine's Memorial, Isabella, James, and Michael had learned lessons that most people spend lifetimes trying to understand. They learned that love isn't about possession or control. It's about wanting the best for someone, even when the best doesn't include you in the way you'd hoped. They learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about choosing to write a different future. They learned that family isn't always about blood or marriage certificates. Sometimes it's about the people who show up when you need them most, who choose to stay when they could easily walk away. Most importantly, they learned that the heart's capacity for love is truly infinite. Loving Michael as a friend didn't diminish Isabella's love for James. James's respect for Michael didn't threaten his marriage. Michael's care for Sophia didn't replace his own dreams of fatherhood, it fulfilled them in a way he'd never expected. The story of the Second Chances Clinic spread beyond New York. Other cities began implementing similar programs. Medical schools started teaching about collaborative care models. Most importantly, other families facing complicated relationships began to see new possibilities. Letters poured in from around the world, from divorced parents learning to co-parent peacefully, from stepfamilies finding their rhythm, from friends navigating the aftermath of romantic relationships. The Parks and Michael had shown that love could be transformative rather than destructive, healing rather than hurtful. On Sophia's 5th birthday, as she blew out her candles surrounded by her parents, her baby siblings, and her Uncle Mike, Isabella reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. The emergency that could have destroyed her family had instead expanded it in ways she never could have imagined. The man she'd once loved had become the guardian angel of her children. The husband she'd chosen had become the foundation of a legacy that would help thousands of families. That night, as they tucked Sophia into bed, she asked the question she'd been asking for months. "Mommy, why do I have the best Uncle Mike in the whole world?" Isabella smiled, the same smile she'd worn on her wedding day, on the day Sophia was born, on the day the clinic opened. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. Uncle Mike loves us not because he has to, but because he chooses to. And we love him the same way." James appeared in the doorway, carrying baby Carmen. "Is someone telling stories about Uncle Mike again?" "The best stories," Sophia said sleepily. "The ones where everyone lives happily ever after." As Isabella tucked her daughter under the covers, she thought about the message she'd want to share with anyone facing their own complicated relationships, their own second chances, their own moments of choosing between fear and love. Love isn't about finding the perfect person or the perfect situation. It's about choosing to see the good in imperfect people and making the best of imperfect situations. It's about believing that there's enough happiness in the world for everyone, and that someone else's joy doesn't diminish your own. The unthinkable thing that happened at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital was this. 3 people who had every reason to hurt each other chose to heal each other instead. They chose to believe that love multiplies when it's shared, that families can be built from the most unlikely foundations, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of what you thought you wanted and embracing what you actually need. Their story reminds us that the people we're meant to love aren't always the people we end up with romantically, and that's not a tragedy. It's a gift. It's a chance to experience love in all its forms, to build families that transcend traditional boundaries, and to discover that the heart truly has infinite capacity for caring. In a world that often tells us to choose sides, to see love as a competition, to believe that someone else's happiness threatens our own, Isabella, James, and Michael chose a different path. They chose to see love as collaboration, as multiplication, as the force that builds bridges instead of walls. And that choice, that simple, revolutionary choice to love without limits, changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. It's a reminder that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or fame or success. It's the decision to love openly, to forgive freely, and to believe that there's always room for more love in the world. What do you think? Could you forgive an ex who saved your family? Could you befriend someone your partner once loved? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and we'd love to hear your own stories of unexpected families and second chances.